Hello and good evening, and welcome to our final session of the Temporary Temples Crop Circle Conference 2023. I'm Karen Alexander, and I'll be your moderator and host for this evening, as always. This evening, we have got Gary King with us. Gary's a long-time friend and colleague, and I think has been visiting Crop Circle since the mid-2000s. Is that right, Gary?
97 was my
Oh,
first.
97. Wow. So so a long time then. He's another one of our long-time contributors to the conference. And I'm always very excited to see what he's going to present. So I'm going to hand over to you, Gary, if that's okay.
Sure, thank you.
I will be in the
Like,
background if you need
what do
me.
I what do
So
I do to share my my
there
keynote
should be are you viewing on a PC?
on a Mac?
On a MacBook. So
Yeah,
right at the bottom, there should be a green button that says share screen.
got it. Okay.
Okay, so I'm now seeing your screen, Gary.
Okay. Do you see the notes or do you just see the slide?
We
Now it
just see
is.
the slide.
Yeah.
You just see the slide. Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right.
Uh,
Could I just remind everybody just before Gary starts to please mute your microphone so that he doesn't get disturbed by background noises? That would be great. Thank you, everybody. Off you go, Gary. All yours.
Thanks. Okay. Head into gear. I I've entitled this The Creative Actor Way of Being because my whole journey since 1997 has been about creativity, really. Last year, I talked about my journey with regards to the internal martial arts and how that has been my kind of track or my rail that's enabled me to have a focus throughout this journey. And it happens to coincide with a deep sort of introspective um, physical art, as well as obviously where that encompasses and connects with mind, and so this this journey that's happened alongside the crop circles with the internal martial arts has been something that's really just danced around this whole notion of creativity. And so, along the way, these have been my studies about philosophy, and one of my favorite documentaries is Being in the World. It's sort of basically a phenomenological based approach to life, where you learn about life and you learn about yourself through an experience rather than something that's kind of an analytical study where you just learn from books and sit there and think about things. It's more of a hands-on kind of approach, which is very sort of Eastern philosophical way of approaching the world. So that's why I called it the creative active way of being. And there's some other reasons, which are synchronicities along the way that have come up during this season, which I'm going to present to you. So crop circles, it's been said many times before, but it's worth mentioning again. We call them circles, crop circles. And there have been, that we do call them formations and we do call them designs, and obviously other languages have come in and called them agroglyphs. And I remember Professor JP DeVee, we had a conversation in Brazil, I think back in about 2010, about whether or not they should be called rifts, because they're this kind of creative, spontaneous thing that takes basic geometry and expresses them in new ways. But circles, they've been called crop circles, and they still are called crop circles. And the reason is, I think, because that's how they started. They started as simple circles. And once you dive into the rabbit hole that is the crop circles, and realize that in this simple circle, in what is a simple circle, is great profundity. That it's simple and profound at the same time. This whole notion that you have a rational diameter, a measurement of one, which is finite and rational, and when you measure that in relationship to the circumference, it's about the relationship between that finite line. You then have an infinite circle around it, the circumference. And so this whole philosophical leap then into the, a connection between our finite lives, how we live our life, and this cyclical nature of nature itself, the way that it recycles the birds and the bees and so on. And then also this existential kind of notion about, do we have a soul, and does life go on, or is there a cycle of reincarnation and so on? So this circle just gets more and more profound, the simple symbol. But that's how crop circles started. And so the story, and I think we are wired for stories as human beings. This is something I've explored in great depth, about how we respond to stories, how before the invention of writing, before a written symbolic form of communication took place through humanity, we told stories. And the stories had these twists and turns and dramas, and they had this kind of 3-act structure that hooked us in and made us remember. And often they were played along to music, and they have a function, like with the Aboriginals, who have the song lines, so that they can walk around. They're essentially maps for their landscapes. They animate the landscape from dream time and walk through singing the songs and telling the stories. And that's how they not only relate to the landscape that they live in, but also to this dream time, this other world, right? That's around them and inside them at the same time, that they talk about. And so Wiltshire, where the crop circles are, very synonymous around the world, obviously is a place that we've talked about many times, about circles are not something they're not unfamiliar with them. Stonehenge and Avebury and other various barrows and so on that are around the Wiltshire area show us that there is, once again, this mystery that's from the old times, and it's connected to, in some ways, the mystery to a mystery in the modern times. And so the landscape, I found this picture online. It's brilliant, isn't it? Hunter-gatherers, yeah, he's on his way home from the nightclub. But this is where we transformed from hunter-gatherers, from times like that, into farmers. This Wiltshire landscape, that's the first area of trees that got cleared. And I've always said, I think there's a context. Every communication needs a context, and the context for the communication of the crop circles is where they are placed. And so Wiltshire being this area of mystery with Stonehenge and so on, but also farming, where farming began, where we as a civilization, or a species, transformed from being hunters and gatherers into farmers, and Wiltshire's where it took place. And so I think this transformation area, this notion of transformation, is synonymous in the context of the communication by being placed in this area. So farming began obviously humbly, and we still had a connection to nature using animals, and really only farming for many, many years what we needed. We didn't make a surplus, and it's only when we did make a surplus that then people had an advantage over other people, and wealth, and the whole spiral really of ownership and land and wealth came from a surplus of grain. So it's an interesting story connected to our transformation into farmers, and what it's actually done to us as a species from the moment we started to create a surplus of grain. Because now we're in this sort of industrialized mega corporation of an industry, where it's taking bizarre turns as well. We have farmers in Holland, Netherlands, and so on. They're massive protests because the nitrogen's not being supplied. Their farms have been closed down. Apparently, we're not going to produce nitrogen anymore because it's bad for the environment. There's arguments for that, but to close down farming, and then we're being told that it's going to be replaced with insect burgers and and other forms of protein that are going to be lab-based rather than nature-based. So there's this moving away from nature that's associated with what was once this industrialized farming that's now being largely blamed for being a major contributor towards climate change, and therefore it's going to be closed down, and we as a species are going to find alternative means of energy that's going to be controlled by corporations. So there's a whole story in the context of crop circles and farming being a context for communication and us as a species and our journey right there. And obviously could go on. So Clay Hill, the origins of the crop circles, it's been mentioned before, started around this area, around the Clay Hill area, which is sort of southeast, I believe, of Alton Barnes. Without looking at a map, I wouldn't jump to that as a definite, but it's definitely south. And Clay Hill was the home of the Warminster Thing. In the 1960s and 1970s, there were all these strange occurrences around this area where lots and lots of people, you can go on YouTube and look at videos of people having meetings in a village hall and discussing these noises and these lights and various other things they were seeing in the sky. And it culminated, I think, in about 1972 when about 10,000 people went up onto the top of that hill you see there to try and hear or see the thing. And shortly after that sort of fizzled out, the crop circles began around Upton Scudamore and around this area and sort of south of there. But I remember talking to John Martineau in back in 2014, and he said that he took a flight over the south of England, over the sort of Wiltshire, Hampshire area in the early days. And there were so many individual circles that were just laid out along the landscape randomly. He said it's like some huge giant had flicked a paintbrush and just there were all these dots and of circles of varying sizes that were individual circles, but that nonetheless all sort of spread out amongst the landscape. So that's an interesting notion. But there's a sense of beginnings and origins with Clay Hill for me, with this Warminster Thing as being a mystery that sort of engrossed people or got people's attention, and they were making demands of the government. They wanted answers because they thought there was a military connection because of all the military bases around there. It is in Warminster, for example. And so when that fizzled out and the crop circles began, this other sort of more nuanced and complex form of communication or attempt at making us confront the mystery of something began. And so here we are this year, 2023, with this circle with a center, with a very clearly defined center. And there's a ratio and a proportion of the relationship between that center circle and the circle, the big circle and the circumference on the outside. One of Steve's lovely shots there. And you can see the overhead. It's quite a big circle, this one. You see the tram lines are around 25 meters, 75 feet apart. So if you count across, it's a very big and well-defined circle. Now, one of the coincidences that came up for me was that I bought this book previously, prior to this crop circle appearing, and it had been in my sort of audio books library ready for me to get to. And there it is, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. Rick Rubin, he's this really cool dude, man. If you watch him on Joe Rogan, he's just this long gray hair, long gray beard guy who's worked with some of the top artists, musicians around the world. And he describes his speciality as being able to bring out the best in a person or create the right environment for the creative spirit to come out of the artist. So they'll hire him. He's got no kind of role like a music producer or whatever that's defined in the music business. He's this go-to guy that they say, right, we want you to partner with these musicians. They're going to produce an album and do what you need to do your magic to bring the best out of them so that, you know, they channel the muse. And he does it, and he's done it over and over and over again. And he describes the process of the artists, of how some of them have a completely different process of creativity to others. some of them will just sit there and they'll work in their head, and others they'll need to change an environment. And he says he just has this gut feeling. This works from his gut all the time, where he just, tries things and works things through and has a gut feeling about this, and then gets them in the right place where they produce the magic. And so it's really interesting to hear what he's learned over the last 40 years of working with creatives and understanding the creative process and the magic that's involved. And when you listen to him speak, he says, what he's learned really over the years is that we know so little. We should be so humbled in the majesty of the creation that we live in and the abilities that we have to be creative. And so I find that very inspiring, that I had this book in my library ready to read, and then this crop circle appeared and sort of jolted me up and said, you need to pay attention to this. You put it in your library. Let's have a look. And anyway, last year, when I presented this sort of personal journey about the martial arts, it's funny because I haven't taken my Sifu, my martial arts teacher I've been with for over 20 years. He's a Chinese man in his 70s now. And it's a very esoteric style of Kung Fu that I do based on the movements of the praying mantis insect. So it's very deep. It comes from a sect. It's called Jiao Ga Tong Long Pai, which Pai means sect. They were these closed circles, the Hut Ga people. And so I feel very privileged that I'm an indoor student, and have been for a few years of my Sifu. Anyway, he hasn't been to a crop circle with me. And over the years, he's been very supportive of me in my research with the crop circles. And this year, I said, look, when a crop circle comes, I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to take you this year. And he's like, okay. So when this circle appeared, this one that we're discussing now with the little circle in the center, I called him up and said, I'll come and train on Saturday morning. After that, we'll go down there. And he said, okay. When I got there, family had arrived. His sister had come from Hong Kong, and he said, I can't go. But he made this comment which was quite interesting. He said, oh, it's quite a simple one. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's also very profound. And I pulled this picture up. And over the years, he's taught me about the center and uniting the whole body to work as one unit and with the mind and so on and so forth. This has been the whole teaching. And when I started to talk to him about that with this image, he was, wow, loved it. And that's why he's always been very supportive, because he's very interested in the stuff that's come out of these studies that I've made with the crop circles. And so one of the ways we've looked at a circle over the years with regards to the martial arts is like, imagine that circle is looking down on top of somebody's head. And so if you put your arms out and you turn, that's your boundary, right? That's your perimeter. That's your personal space. That's your world. Anything outside of that, that's outside of you, but that's you. That's your boundary. And so boundaries are very important things, aren't they? They're very important physically, and they're very important psychologically. We live in a world now where our thoughts, and the way that we think or the way we ask questions about certain subjects is jumped on in certain ways. And censorship is real right now with regards to various things in the media and alternative stories or alternative questions about any subject. And so I would argue that our boundaries have been severely crossed with regards to the way our abilities to be able to think clearly or critically about certain subjects in the media or in the news in general and world politics and so on. So that's a huge boundary that's infiltrated through the media and the sophistication of media. And then, of course, there's physical boundaries. The martial arts is ostensibly about protecting your physical boundaries, but it is on the internal level, when you get to the mind and how the mind integrates and works with the body, it's all about this way that our boundaries can be infiltrated by other people from outside, and also once they're in there, they can plant a seed where there's a bug in the system, and we can play on ourselves inside. And so the circle I was taught, using and looking at this circle, that it's very symbolic of what we're actually trying to deal with when we're pursuing the internal arts. I also brought this image up last year when I talked, because one of the big things with regards to the internal practice, there's three main disciplines, and they all come from various families and ideas in martial arts. But connections to nature is a huge thing with Taoism. And this particular system is called Bagua. And they walk a circle. They walk a circle over and over and over again. And they turn in spirals and move and face an imaginary center. And as you can see, this person's done this quite a lot. And they do it. When they do it, their feet move so that the front foot makes a circle and walks the circumference of the circle, but the back foot stays square. The inside foot, the foot that's facing into the center, that stays square. So there's a kind of square in the circle as you walk around. And if you do this naturally, you'll find naturally you can walk in a sort of reasonable size circle. You will make 8 divisions of that circle, which is the 8 trigrams of the I Ching and how the heaven and earth symbols are laid out on those on that diagram called Bagua. So you can see this guy here, you know, his inside foot look is square in front of him, and his back foot there's kind of come forward. He's walking the circle, and it's this simple practice, this what seemingly simple practice. I challenge you to do it. It's actually really quite difficult to do. Is hugely profound about learning about circles. Yeah. You know, Karen's always said with her geometry workshops, and it's so true. If you want to understand about geometry, you know, draw them, draw these diagrams, draw this geometry. But if you want to understand some of the deeper philosophy of how your body and your mind integrates with some of this geometry, then walk a circle like they do in Bagua, or do Tai Chi where everything moves in circles. It's quite profound. So this symbol is also the astrological symbol for the sun, the center. It's funny because when I watched Rick Rubin, the author of, you know, the creative guy, on Joe Rogan, and I can't remember what Joe Rogan said now about his interpretation of what it was, but Rick Rubin said that ever since he's produced the book and he put that on the front cover, so many people have come to him and said, I see it as this, I see it as that. And he said he really just put it there as the astrological symbol for the sun because he thought, you know, that's a great symbol for this. But it's funny how many people, how so many people have got their own interpretations and have come to him and said, I think it's this, I see it as this. And that's something we've also seen in the crop circles quite a lot, where people, their own mind goes on to what it is. And there's this, later, sooner or later, you realize there's this reciprocity with how the symbol is working with you and how, you know, you're projecting onto the symbol. And then years later, you'll go back to a symbol and you'll look at it again and you'll realize you'll see loads of things in it you didn't see before. And that's when Bert Janssen once said to me, you know, I'd realized then that it wasn't the symbol that changed. It wasn't the crop circle that changed. I'd changed since I last looked at it. And I think that's quite profound with the journey of crop circles as well. You get to measure some of your own change. So there it is, that we get this wonderful halo, don't we, around the sun. That's again very, very reminiscent of this crop circle. This was taken by somebody in Wales at the Three Cliffs Bay in the Gower Peninsula. One of the best examples I've seen of this halo around the sun. And so there it is. The 10th of August 23 was when this formation appeared. 13th was the final crop circle of the season, and they mirror in some ways. Can you see the central little circle in there and the circumference? We've got a lovely pattern on the one on the left, but they were the two final formations of this 2023 season. And then the image that you see at the bottom is a fog bow. So Nick Bull, one of the photographers out there, Stonehenge Dronescapes, he flew over it and then got this reflection, you know, back from the fog with his camera on his drone. And you see this wonderful circle with a dot in the center. It's just happy coincidence, isn't it? But I find it quite funny, really, that happened. Anyway, do some research into to this simple circle with a center like that, and you find again in Chinese philosophy and mysticism that you've got this bi disc, this symbol for heaven. And it's there are some historians which doubt that it's a symbol for heaven, but you know, that's the way academics go. They don't all agree with each other, but they found it these symbols so many times with symbols that are known to be the symbols for Earth that you know, they're pretty much convinced that this is a symbol for heaven. And it was often depicted in jade. You'll see these in so many places in Chinese homes. There's even some Neolithic examples of this kind of design. They're everywhere. You can just search them. So it's not something that that we're unfamiliar with, that we're being reminded of here, I think. I also found this when I was looking online. I also found this wonderful mushroom. I've had this kind of lovely association with studying mushrooms along the way as well, which has come up during my research. And so when I found this the other day, I thought, that's funny, isn't it? They always come back to the mushrooms. The indigo blue mushroom, this one's called. So now there's also something else which I've picked up along the way as well from it's not my own research. I've just, you know, happened to have been around some very brainy people along the way who've come up with stuff which I found just so cool. And so it's when we look at that diagram there, that we see the sun, and then we see Mercury, and then we see Venus, and then we see the Earth, right? We're the third rock from the sun. And we know that you know, it's the kind of Goldilocks effect, isn't it? That we're just far enough away from the sun, and we're just the right size, and our moon's just far enough away for us to, you know, for us to be able to have a watery planet that life creates and evolves and arrives at us, where we're clever enough to scratch our heads and ask questions about what the hell's going on. And it's all because we're spinning around in space on this ball of rock, the third rock from the sun, and it's all just, you know, laid out just in the right, you know, proportions and ratios for us to have life. You know, if we know now that if you change any of the parameters just a little bit, just change one of the dials, then, you know, the universe flies apart too quickly and we don't have life. So that's a miracle in itself. And one of the things I came across some years ago, this is work done by John Martineau some years ago, was that when you, on sort of cold, chilly afternoons in the northern hemisphere, you see this sunbow, this rainbow around the sun, but it's more than that. There's something else going on which is quite magical. So let's have a look at this little video and you'll see what I mean. There's some wonderful pictures. Now, in between us, remember, the closest planet to the sun is Mercury, and then it's Venus, then it's us. So in this example here, you can see two rainbows. There's even a crescent at the top. Now, here we are looking out into space towards the sun with Venus and Mercury going around the sun. Now, it just so happens that internal rainbow, the proportions are exactly the orbits of Mercury, the orange line that you see there going around. And the outer rainbow is exactly the proportions of Venus as it goes around the sun, viewed from our perspective when we're looking towards the sun as humans, with our eyes and our minds and our ability to say, wow, look at that. Isn't that cool? Those two rainbows actually map out the proportions of Mercury and Venus's orbits around the sun. So the only two rainbows we see, the only two circles we see around the sun, exactly map out those orbits. Now, not only that, they also act as a scale model, as you see there, for Mars and Venus. And so there's a 3-to-4 ratio, just like music, of the way Mars and Venus go around. Now, Mars is behind us in the sky, so it's bigger than any circle you can draw in the sky. But those two rainbows are also a scale model for Mars and Venus. So that's a huge coincidence, isn't it? That just happens to be the case. That those rainbows are caused by ice particles which are high up in the atmosphere, and so it's just light refracting through the ice particles. There is no connection between optics and gravitation. So what we're seeing there is a beautiful coincidence, as John Martineau so wonderfully put it when I first discovered, when he first showed me this. So that simple circle, this simple circle with the little circle in the center, just happens to be there up in the heavens, and happens to be this strange coincidence and synchronicity that shows us where the orbits of the two planets that are in between us and the sun are. Isn't that cool? Oh, I also wanted to point this out, because over the years, these little circles with the little circle in the center have been sort of there, and we've walked around in them and walked around them. It's like this thing that's been hidden right in front of us, that we've sort of walked around and interacted with, but we've been distracted by the larger picture that's around it, the geometry that's around it. But there in the center is this little symbol for heaven, which I think is kind of cool. There we are. That wasn't me, but some other people enjoying the sunshine in the summer in Wiltshire, sitting in the center of a crop circle. So one of the members of my Facebook group Against the Grain, Willful, he came up with this, and showed that there's actually a ninefold division of the circle that's proportioned around that central circle. So in other words, if you draw a 9-pointed star, where the points of that 9-pointed star touch the circumference of the outer circle, then you will see that it encloses the straight lines that cross over, enclose that central circle perfectly. So that means that central circle is deliberately proportioned, and it's hiding ninefold geometry inside it. So 9 in sort of sacred geometry terms, it's the last number before you get to 10, and 10 is 1 plus 0. So 9 is this number for completion. It's the end of a circle, in other words, and that's the kind of weirdness of a circle, in that where's the beginning and where's the end? That's this eternity, isn't it? Where's the beginning and where's the end? It's that question that drives you mad, chicken and the egg. Where's the beginning? Where's the end? Well, 9 was seen as this completion, and then this rebirth came from when you arrived at 10. And so this symbol for heaven, and the symbol of the circle, and having a ninefold hidden geometry in it, and also, one cycle ending and another cycle beginning. Gurdjieff's philosophy school was all based on this sort of ninefold geometry. So I think there's a message in there about completion, and about something ending and something new beginning, that's hidden in the message of this crop circle. And so I wanted to bring up this issue again of the circle being this beginning. Yeah, we've seen the crop circles and the circle at Clay Hill being connected to the beginning, and life itself begins with this cell, this circle. This circle has no defined center. This is the egg that's provided by the goddess, isn't it? That before the male principle comes along and fertilizes the egg, then we get polarity, and then we get this cycle of life that comes out. But it starts with this circle. And so this animation then, when the egg gets fertilized and turns into we get this state of polarity, the thing that sort of starts off the multiplicity and gives rise to infinity, comes from the circle, and then comes about from this separation, this polarity. So that we have the circle as source. And this is seen as, this is where the term know thyself comes in, because it's like, if you've just got oneness, you've got wholeness. You can't cut it into an infinite number of pieces. It has to look in the mirror. It has to reflect upon itself. And that's kind of what this is here. It's a reflection of this dual nature of polarity, of male and female principle. Probably not allowed to say that these days now, certainly not some countries, I suppose, but Anyway, this is the way it was traditionally looked at by the ancient geometers. So the vesica Pisces, this symbol of two circles and creating that almond shape, the vesica in the center, which is the birth canal of creation, symbolically with geometry, because the perfect triangle comes from there, and then square and pentagon and so on. And so this is where birth comes from that unity, from that wholeness, the circle. It reflects upon itself, creating the vesica Pisces, a male and female principle duality, a yin yang. And it's from that we get the multiplicity, the infinite number of variations in creativity that we see around us in nature. And this animation here, there you see the egg, and it creating on the right hand side there B into 2 into the vesica. And then obviously the egg divides and carries on multiplying. So we see this playing out in nature, don't we? So that's polarity, symbolized by the Chinese with the yin yang symbol. And again, once you start dabbling, these are what John Michel called the numbers of beginning, 1 and 2. They're the numbers of the beginning of things. And so if you look there, there's an elastic band there underneath the vesica Pisces on this image. Michael Schneider gave a talk last year for Scott Onstott and Jeff Fitzpatrick's group, and he talked about if you have an elastic band over your thumb, that elastic band's kind of, it's not doing anything. There's no potential in it. But if you put your other finger in the elastic band and pull it, now you've got tension. Now you've got potential, and this is where life, by being stretched, by being pulled apart, and given polarity, life comes into existence and potential and for creativity happens. And so you'll see the north-south pole there with the magnet and the yin yang, and the vesica, there's the Buddha, the Bodhidharmas depicted inside the vesica. There's always hidden symbols that are left. The Christ in the bottom right-hand corner there is often depicted inside the vesica Pisces. And you've got the electron and the proton at the top, this duality of on the atomic level that creates this potential and has all that energy inside it. So this 1 to 2, this simple circle that then divides into 2, becomes very, very profound in so many aspects of our thought about life, nature, and the universe and everything that goes in it. And so this wonderful picture showing this resonance. We talk about vibration, the infinite universe being consistent of resonance and vibration. It's that resonance, that wriggling that gives rise to life. But if it wasn't ordered, if it wasn't patterned in some way, then it would just fly apart. So this is where questions of, a designer or an architect or an infinite mind, come into play, where because the coincidences add up and add up and add up, and after a while you say this can't be a random accident. There's too many parameters which are just perfectly tuned to create the right conditions for us to be here, us humans to be here and ask questions about life and participate in life itself. So it's quite profound because of this resonance that we see between duality and polarity. And the crop circles, as you can see, have reminded us of this along the way, that this polarity, this resonance is very important for our experience as human beings on Earth. So we've got the circle. When I was researching for this talk, I've often thought about, and talked about the connection to the military, right? Wiltshire is also it's our military headquarters. It's where our biggest, Salisbury maneuver training ground is the biggest military training ground in Europe. So much of our military industrial kind of complex is dotted around Wiltshire and soldiers and Air Force and so on and so forth. So Wiltshire is really synonymous with war, with conflict. And I was thinking, right, well, I want to bring up this subject of squares, right? And squares and how squares and circles go together, because we've had this, this notion of squaring the circle along the way and this connection to heaven and earth. And I went online and found this video which connected the military issue of squares and square minds with a Monty Python clip, which made me laugh because he even talks about God at the beginning of it. Check this out. It made me laugh.
Open, like you've never seen the hand of God before. Now, today we're going to do marching up and down the square. That is, unless any of you got anything better to do. Well, anyone got anything they'd rather be doing than marching up and down the square? Yes, Atkinson. What would you rather be doing, Atkinson?
Well, to be quite honest, Sarge, I'd rather be at home with the wife and kids.
Yes, excellent. Square, marching up and down the square. Square bashing is the military. Now, it's funny because, you know, it made me laugh to have that clip, but this is such a rudimentary thing about how you control the will of somebody, how the military, our military, uses square bashing and walking in squares to condition a mind to become a killer, to condition a mind to become a soldier, which is that you're a professional killer, right? Using squares. Now, we know squares are the symbol for Earth, you know, in sacred geometry, but I found it profound, right, that we've got this juxtaposition with Wiltshire where we've got life and we've got where farming began and we've got the crop circles and we've got Stonehenge and the stone circles. But we've also got this dark side. Now, it's all right on the spiritual journey, okay, to talk about, you know, love and light. But also, you've got to talk about and you've got to embrace and understand darkness as well, because that is the duality of nature. The darkness is this wholeness that we all have within our nature, we all have within our own selves, and we all witness on the outside of us with regards to what's going on in various places around the world with war. And once, I think Jesus actually said this in the Bible when he said, war, people say war is hell, but hell is war. And so when I see the military connections to Wiltshire, and when I came up with that clip, which is quite funny because it's from Monty Python, but it's very real, and it's talking about square, and it's talking about people marching the square, so that in the end their will just becomes do what you're told, go over there and kill those people because we told you to. They don't have independence of thought anymore. I just think that's very interesting for who we are as human beings, and this whole connection to life, creativity, and where we are in the world right now, with particularly with what's going on, you know, in the Middle East and so on. So a square, we use it in our language as well, don't we? The square answer. I want a square answer to my question. Let's have a square deal. Yeah, let's have a square meal, or 3 square meals a day. That's another military kind of connotation to it. A square peg in a round hole. When we go back to the beginning, we go back to square one. We use it as a derogatory term to, you know, be there or be square. Let's be fair and square. Look someone square in the eye. Square things away. To square off with somebody. Actually, I misspelt that. It should be off. So that's like military as well. That's fighting. That's right. To square off with someone, we use square again, or to square up, pay the bill. So I think Teddy Roosevelt came up with this square deal years ago. So they've used it in ways to kind of appeal to our minds in certain ways, and it obviously works in some ways. But I really like the connection that John Michel made with heaven and earth, with the squaring of the circle. And so this animation here shows the wonderful coincidence of, if you take a piece of string and they're the same length and make a square and a circle out of them, then the square will exactly encompass the proportions of the earth, and the circle that's around it, that goes through the center of the moon, if you to figuratively pull the moon out of the sky and sit it on top of the earth, goes right through the center and actually squares the circle to perfect accuracy. And as you can see there, it mirrors the rainbows that we see whenever we see these 2 rainbows. So this connection of heaven and earth and rainbows and circles It was actually written in the Bible, the bridge between heaven and earth. I'm not religious in any way, but I've studied a lot of things. But this connection to heaven and earth is depicted there as a bridge, the rainbow being a bridge between heaven and earth. So I find that very poignant as well. This is Frank Lauman's recent picture up in Scotland. He's been doing some great photography, and he just managed to catch a double rainbow. It's just amazing that we get to see these things. You know, I remember John Marno and I, we had this week together in South Africa some years ago, and we kept talking about all these things and all these coincidences that stack up with all this stuff. And I said, well, so what's it all mean, John? What's it all for? And he said, it's for us to say, wow. It's just wow. And isn't that cool, right? You know, we get to go, wow, look at that. And obviously the people who built Stonehenge, you know, they had this connection to the notion of squaring the circle, because this geometry is repeated. You see, if we take a circle and put it around the outside of the sarsen stones, if they're all complete, and then a square on the inside that touches the sides of the inside, then we get this squared circle. So this connection of heaven and earth in a squared circle, of earth and the moon in a squared circle, and Stonehenge having the same geometry, meant that, you know, I believe it's quite clear that our ancestors had these notions of heaven and earth, and depicted it in their stone circles, these monuments, as a kind of university to teach people to find out about these hidden things within nature. That's the majesty and the miracle of creation. And so in the crop circles here, these quintuplets that we had so many of, once we'd had this evolution of the first circles, single circles on their own, and once we'd sort of paid attention for a while, then they turned into 2 circles and 3, and then eventually we got to these quintuplets, and you know, that it's been said many times that the discovery of how we realized that there was squared circles hidden within this came about from Michael Glickman finding it in a formation from 98, and then Alan Brown looking back over 25 years of the history of all of these different quintuplets and finding that they did indeed square the circle in ingenious, simple ways. So this example here, I'm not sure when that crop circle was, but you can see from this graphic that if you take a circle and put it through the center of those satellite circles, and then just put 4 imaginary ones, that's just for the benefit of making it easy look, and put a square around the outside of those, really you just do it with the 4 that were already there. But then you've got a perfectly squared circle. So the crop circles were even in the early days, way back in the early days, they were hiding this symbol in these simple 5 dots, right? So I'll never forget Alan Brown when he said on Terry Toffness's documentary, you know, when you've got something that's very complex, like squaring a circle, and let me be clear, right? But a square is a rational, finite thing, and a circle contains this incommensurate circumference. So to unite the two, to make them have the same perimeter, match up with the circumference, or to have the same area, is impossible. But you can get really close. And for some strange reason, since Plato, geometers right up until the present day tried to solve this problem for mathematical reasons and also for philosophical reasons. But it was originally a philosophical conundrum, cosmological conundrum. And they didn't succeed. You know, that you can look back at all the attempts that these high-level academics made all through the different universities in France and the UK and around the world to try and solve this problem. Didn't get there. And then we find these 5 dots placed in fields in Wiltshire that for 25 years nobody really realized that they contained a solution to this age-old problem in such a simple way that you could, you know, I taught my children how to do it when they were young. So this is very profound, I think, because if somebody found a solution to square in the circle, they would definitely jump on it and want all the world's recognition. I got it, look, and I've got it with 5 simple dots. But we didn't have any of that for 25 years. So that speaks to an intellectual profile, a level of humility and egolessness that doesn't exist in the world as far as I'm concerned. And it also enabled us, or Michael Glickman and then Alan Brown, to discover this and then inform all of us that this is what these symbols contain. They contain this wonderful solution to this age-old problem. So there's an intelligence, isn't there? There's something hidden. There's something hidden beneath creation. There's something hidden that we can't quite see and we can't quite touch, and we can't quite put our finger on. And it's teased. We're teased with it, with solutions to problems like this, or things that are hidden for us to find, mysteries for us to uncover. So another fascinating topic that's come up over the years is this Chinese concept of Li. It's really worth looking into. It's basically this organic pattern. I think Jeffrey Needham called it an organic pattern in nature. But what's fascinating about it is that, you know, you can look at things that are like properly proportioned, and we know that like a 2-to-1 ratio and a 3-to-1 ratio and a golden ratio are beautiful to our eyes. We just find them intuitively harmonious and pleasing, right? So artists and architects have used them over the years. But with Li, with this kind of random organic pattern, you just get this stuff like this, right? And I challenge you to find the pattern in that. Find the mathematical pattern in that. You won't. But why is it beautiful to us? Why do we find that appealing, us, when we look at it? What is it about these patterns in nature that just draw us into something that's there, but we can't quite put our finger on it? It's something. You look at a wave in the ocean. Look at all the randomness, or so-called randomness, mess of all those bubbles, and yet it looks beautiful to us. We find beauty in it. We find something that draws us in. When you learn the martial arts, the internal arts, this sort of more philosophical stuff, and there's these 3 levels. I've said this before, but it's worth pointing out. There's these 3 levels to the martial arts. There's the kind of animal level where you go to the gym and you pump weights and do all this stuff and turn yourself into the nastiest, fiercest beast, and then you get in a cage and try to tear somebody apart. That's the physical animal side of martial arts. Then there's the human side of martial arts, where you try to understand physics and leverage and how to create a fulcrum and how to use less energy to get more. So you get this dynamic sphere of Aikido, and, you know, not resisting force, some elements of yin and yang, so that if somebody pushes towards you and they become hard, then you become soft, and you use these principles to overcome your opponents. And there's some element of the intellectual in that, and then leading you into the philosophical and sort of spiritual realm. And the spiritual is more this realization that, you know, the ultimate war really is with yourself, to know yourself, and it all, the more you know yourself, the more, weirdly, there's a guy who's on the circuit who's pretty good at the Tai Chi and stuff, and he was asked recently, how do I increase my chi? You know, because people think there's thousands of snake doctors out there, snake charmers, let's say, snake oil salesmen who say, oh yeah, you know, I've got this secret breathing exercise, and you can suck energy in from the universe, and you'll have all this sort of stuff. Don't you believe it? The way that you increase chi once you've got your body to work as one unit is to know yourself. And the more you know yourself, the more you connect with your internal landscape and realize that there's this very fine line between the outside and the inside and this world that we interact with. That's when the chi starts to flow more and more, and it's really exciting when you actually start to realize that. And so what it leads you down the path of is that you learn all these kind of moves. Like I say, move like this and move like that and do this and do that. But then eventually you have to own it. You have to take this leap to be creative, to take those principles, if they're very clever, if they're like the crop circles where they give you some basic numbers and principles, and then you take those and then you vary them in different ways, and then all of a sudden you're creating stuff that's new. And when I go back to my teacher now and again, you know, come up with something, and he says, yeah, that's really interesting because we haven't thought of that, and we're coming up with new stuff based on these simple principles of the way he's taught us. You know, it's called the 5+2, these simple moves that move in a figure of 8, but from them comes this infinity of creativity with regards to the way that you can use your mind inside your body and move your chi around. It's fascinating stuff. Anyway, it leads me back to this was my sort of childhood hero, Bruce Lee. And this thing he said about, I'm not teaching you anything. I'm just helping you to explore yourself. And so that crossover, okay, of because they talk about learning creativity as if it can be taught in schools, right? But you can't teach creativity. If you could, then the mystery would be over, because where does creativity come from, right? Where does writers, speak to artists who talk about the muse, who talk about the inspiration that comes to them, connects two things together, and all of a sudden a new idea comes that can be brought out and benefit people in the world, that can enhance people's lives, right? Where do these ideas come from? Is this world that we live in, this soup of chi, is it just a soup of ideas, and we're just these vessels that can channel these ideas when we're ready to receive them? But we've got to put the 10,000 hours in, I believe, first, in whatever endeavor it is that we do, and then we might have the hopes of being touched by this magic. And you hear these stories. I've heard these stories over the years of Elizabeth Gilbert, you know, the author that wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She gave a talk on TED, and she said about she talked about what's her name, Ruth Gray, I think, the poet, this famous Pulitzer Prize winning poet who was interviewed when she was like in her 80s, and they said to her, you know, where did you get your ideas for these poems? Where did you get the inspiration? She said, well, it's crazy, really. If I tell you, you'll think I'm mad. And I'm like, no, you know, you're famous and everybody loves your work, and the richness of your words, and how you know, conjure up images in people's minds with just, you know, the words that you use. How do you do it? And she said, well, when I was young and I was playing out in the fields, you know, I used to be out in the fields, and I'd hear a poem rumbling across the landscape and coming towards me like the wind, and I'd know, and I'd have to run to get to my cabin to get my pencil and paper ready to write this poem down. And she said, and sometimes, you know, I'd get there and I'd sit down just as the poem just as I sat down at my desk, the poem would come into me and I'd write it down as quickly as I could. She said, but sometimes I'd be running towards my cabin, I'd be too far away, and the poem would come through me, and I wouldn't get there in time, and it would go off across the landscape looking for another poem. And she said, one time I actually got there, and the poem just went through me and was leaving, and I reached out and grabbed it and pulled it back and wrote the poem backwards. Well, you'd be locked up for that sort of stuff, wouldn't you? But if you talk to musicians and artists and creatives, you know, so many of them talk about this mysterious paranormal other associated with creativity. Karen and I have been interested in Jeffrey Kripal, and he's got a wonderful book called Authors of the Impossible that talks about writers, Mark Twain and all these people that have had paranormal experiences because of the act of writing. Once they engage the imagination and they start engaging stuff, weird coincidences, weird strange things with time and future and past come into play. things that you just wouldn't associate with normal reality in the act of creativity. And so this picture of Bruce Lee saying, I'm not teaching you anything, I'm just helping you to explore yourself, is because this thing of creativity, where creativity comes from, as the Chinese would put it, is straight from heaven, because we're in heaven, and heaven interacts in and out of us with each breath. It's all around us and we're immersed in it. And that's the way they looked at things. And we just have to do the right things to get into the flow state, as they would say in the modern parlance, so that we can channel these ideas and learn and discover things about ourselves and about the world. I remember giving this book to my son when he was younger. My oldest son's 34 now, and it had a profound effect on him, because Bruce Lee, this is a collection of his essays that were put together, and a lot of them are the same essays, but they've just got a few words that are different. And what you get when you read through them over and over again is that he was trying so hard to just nail a description of what it is to be creative, to get into the act of creativity. And he was just trying, using language, using words to do that. It's a really fascinating book. There were families of artists. I've also studied African music. So I was very interested in polyrhythm and how polyrhythm plays in a circle. So I went out to Africa and studied their music for the last 20 odd years as well. And that's had an influence on my children, because my middle son plays the kora now, which is the storyteller's instrument. And my oldest son plays the djembe very well. They both play very well. And the kora comes from this caste of people that were called griots, the storytellers. And so you get these names like Kuyati or Sissoko and various names that are associated with a bloodline of musicians and storytellers throughout the African continent. We studied the Mandinka music, and it's fascinating how artists were thought of as just belonging to one sort of caste or people. And over the years now, other people that are non-caste musicians have come forward and become absolutely astounding artists. And they were rejected at first because they weren't from the right bloodline or family. But now they're accepted, and you've got female griots, female kora players, which wouldn't have been accepted before. And that's just goes to show that, you know, this dominated sort of idea about only certain people can be creative or be connected to this creative source is nonsense. Everybody can. We're all wired in and plugged in if we just want to take the time to do it. I think AI and some of the advancements that are coming, where they take creativity away, they do so much things for you. They don't get us to engage with nature and life the way that I think is needed to be creative or bring out the creative spirit. Back to this circle then, this sort of Zen circle that was very famous. You know, Taoist and Zen masters, they had a whole methodology of teaching around circles. It was really the way that they could help students make this bridge between the physical world, the world that we sort of go to work and pay the bills and eat our food and cook our food in, but then this other world, this cosmic world that lives just right by us, that we interact with all the time. Most of the time we're not paying attention. It's only a lot of the time it's only for us to pay attention in a certain kind of way to see that it's going on all around us, but nonetheless it's there. And so this blindness to it, these Zen masters would use these kind of strange techniques to get our mind to shift and jump into this alternative perception, which can be a bit jarring. It's a bit like the psychedelic experience. You know, it's a non-ordinary state of consciousness to be hooked into this stuff. And so for people that have got a certain kind of conditioned mindset, funny enough, soldiers and people that have been conditioned in a certain way have great difficulty with that kind of creativity for a long time. It has to be brought out of them in a certain kind of way, I think. So we've got this circle of life, haven't we? The interdependence of life and the birds and the bees and so on that I mentioned earlier. And so again, this year we've had this play on the magic of a circle without a center. And we've had several examples of it. We've had examples in the past, and I've talked about them many times in my lectures around the world, because still people want to talk about, are crop circles man-made? And it's a valid, conversation for people who've just come into it. But I've always found over the years that when something comes up which really seriously brings that into question, they don't want to talk about that particular aspect. They want to talk about stay on the ground that they feel more comfortable on, where there's a sort of circular argument that doesn't get resolved. But this kind of ends that conversation for anybody that wants it to end. There's still a way out for people who just want to not look and deny it. But when you look at these circles without a center in crop that are large and perfect and on uneven ground, there's a real problem, because you cannot make crop stand back up. I wrote a piece on my website, Against the Grain, called Cognitive Dissonance, about how this creates a problem in people's minds, really, when they confront this simple circle that's in front of you, but it's actually miraculous, because what you're seeing there can't be done. You cannot walk out into that field, into the center there, and stand there and then put the crop back up again if somebody were to have made that circle with boards and rope. So once you sort of make the leap from that and say, okay, so we're dealing with something else other that's non-human, then you're in this realm of aliens, and you watch your own mind jump on trying to find an answer, trying to find a solution, trying to put it to bed, rather than embracing a mystery. And it's only when I found in my own journey with this, that when you embrace the mystery, you're no more embracing the mystery of the crop circles as you would be the muse, you would be for where the creative spirit comes from, you would be from the magic of the flow state. These are all mysteries. So, I put that mystery, that source of mystery, of creativity, in the same box. So I put the source of the crop circle designs. And the fact that the circle's there without a center is enough for me. It's not enough for everybody else, I'm sure. It's for some, yes, but not for everybody, of course. And that's their journey. But for me, that's enough. That's enough that there's something going on. And when I love Alan Watts, the old beat generation guy, and he talks about the circle with no center, and the circumference is everywhere, and it's all through Zen and Taoist literature about this mystery of the circle that has no center. And so there we are. And not only that, we're giving it in this Indian kind of chakra symbol with this particular design this year in 2023. Then there was this one. Again, no center, slightly smaller design. This was on seriously uneven ground. If there was another picture of it somewhere where you're looking down the hill that was showing the lay of the land. That's something people don't get another perspective of with crop circles. We're always seeing them from above like this, where they look like they're on a flat postcard. But when you get on the ground, they're not. There's very few flat ground crop circles. So all of the geometry of a circle needs to be compensated to be an oval, so it looks like a circle from above. More layers of complexity that are just not apparent unless you think about them or engage with them. So there's an old example. The mystery is the source that can never be described. We just see these circles, all around us. I read this science fiction, but I've never been a big science fiction reader. I've enjoyed science fiction on TV, but a friend of mine some years ago, about 10 years ago, said, "Oh, you've got to read this Ian Banks, this science fiction writer. He's fantastic." And I think it was called Consider Flabast, the name of the book. And in the beginning, the title of it, just after the introduction of it, it's like these aliens go to a cosmic travel agents, right? And they say, like, where do you want to go? And they say, oh, well, there's an eclipse happening on Earth. And it's such a rare thing, eclipses, that aliens would travel all across the galaxy to watch an eclipse from space, because it's like a tourist destination. It's the way it's put in this science fiction. But I just think that's really cool. It's a great idea, because who wouldn't, if you had a spaceship, you travel across to watch an eclipse. They're really cool. I've seen one in 1999. That was cool. So seeing this circle without a center, the darkness and the light in the sky, again, I think you're looking at a really, something else John Martineau pointed out to me was this really cosmic coincidence about these circles. We just happen to live on this planet where the only circles that we see in the sky are the sun and the moon. The moon just happens to be exactly the right size and exactly the right distance away from the sun, so that it just does that. Any smaller, any bigger, any further away, any larger, it's just this Goldilocks effect, yeah, where it's just perfect for us to look up and say, wow. And so finally, I'd say that, you know, this connection between heaven and earth, there's this book written about psychedelic research called Inner Paths to Outer Space. And I think that's it, really. You know, the internal arts, the internal martial arts, the introspection of what's going on inside of me, whilst I've been contemplating what's going on outside of me with the crop circles and nature and the world and life, has convinced me that there is this kind of magic out there, for want of a better word, that we could call heaven, we can call whatever we like, but we can tap into it and we can be creative. And I think there's ample evidence of the creativity of the human spirit. And I think the crop circles are this pure creativity that we see, that's this animating force that's around us. And there's another slide I was going to put on tonight I forgot to put it on. It's a Avebury Truslow crop circle, 1998. There's a 5-pointed star with scalloped edges around the circle. So the circle wasn't perfect. It had these scallops on the outside, like a doily. And around the 5 points of the star, I wish I'd have brought the picture up, sorry. Maybe we can find it when we're answering questions. But around the outside of the pentagram, these scallops, the lay was in threes. So around each of the points, there was this threefold lay, and then threefold the other side. So sixes were around the 5. Okay. And my teacher, the guy that took me to the crop circles, that was and always will be my life's coach, the guy that changed my life. I had a moment, you know, where I stood inside this crop circle. So much had happened to me in the year. This was 98, and so much had happened to me in the year since I'd first encountered the crop circles. It was, you know, a complete, what they call it, a psychic assault, I suppose. Really, it was just, you know, the world turned upside down. And I remember standing in this crop circle. It's just after the solstice, and looking out and watching people drive past in their cars. And I kind of got sad, you know, that I was standing in this, what I thought to be a miracle, and that all these people were driving past not paying attention. And not only that, you know, the people, my friends and family that I sort of tried to say, I think there's something going on with the crop circles for the whole year before that, and all told me I was nuts. So you know, you get this sense of isolation, and you get this sense of, well, you know, I think, am I mad? You know, I'm questioning yourself, and that's this whole, you know, thing that comes up with introspection, with what happens with the crop circle journey. And my teacher turned to me and looked at me and saw that I had my head down. He said, "Lift your head up, you know, look at this." And he pointed out that this sixfold lay, this 3 and 3 around the points, was the number for heaven. And he said 5, you know, this fivefold symbol for life, was around the outside of, so it was sort of inside the center of the circle. And so 5 then going into 6, he's saying, the reason it's scalloped, the reason the circle's scalloped is that more room's being made in heaven for us, because we've made a mess of things. So more room's just being made for us, you know. And he said this to me in 1998, and I've watched this, the way the world's gone for the last 25 years, and we're all heading. And I think we are in some ways on the brink of destruction, or the brink of salvation in some ways. And I'm very hopeful and very optimistic that the goodness will prevail, and the creation, that this creative force, this thing that we can't put our finger on, that's here, that's responsible for all this, is much bigger than our petty squabbles, and that something's going to happen, I think, that may make us all have pause for thought at some point in the future. And and then it will lead us, I believe, into a more sort of introspective internal journey for our own spirit to evolve and grow. So creativity, a way of being, pursuing any kind of art and doing your 10,000 hours taps you into something which I believe, from my journey with this, is connected to this, whatever it is, this mysterious force behind the crop circles. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. Gary, would you like to stop your screen share?
Sure.
Brilliant. Okay. So first of all, a virtual round of applause for Gary. Well done. Fantastic. A real tour de force there of lots and lots of different ideas, all connected via circles and squares and all that good stuff that kind of, as Alan Brown would say, really just fucks with your mind, really, sometimes, doesn't it all? So what a great talk. I just wanted to say that I think the idea of creativity and where it comes from is actually really important. I mean, it's, the subject of countless books and countless pieces of music and countless paintings and all of that. And when you were talking, it kind of made me think about, if I'm painting or writing, what is my process, I guess. So I think, and I just think actually my process is just to listen, to be just really still and really quiet, and to let all the chatter that goes on in your brain all the time just to sort of fritter away, and just to continue to listen until something speaks to you. It's one of the reasons I can't write if I'm being constantly disturbed. I just can't. I kind of have to just shut the door and, because I can't listen. I can't hear sort of what's going on. But so yeah, I think sort of the idea that there's a definite connection between creativity and that ability to be able to just still yourself enough to be able to listen. So thank you for reminding me of that today. So does anybody have any questions or comments or feedback for Gary? Peter, you were first, and then Melanie. Yep.
Thank you, Gary. Wonderful, wonderful talk.
Thank you.
I share your optimism. I think it will turn out well for humanity in the end. I was wondering, when you had the Clay Hill formation up, I was thinking about all these circles these years without a center, and you brought them up mostly in relation to the fact that it can't be man-made. But I was wondering if, from the perspective of what you said with the Clay Hill formation about the personal space and the perimeter of the circle as a boundary for the self, how, from that perspective, how do you see all these circles without a center? What does that say to you? Do you have any ideas on that?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind really is that you're jumping into this. So from a kung fu and martial arts perspective, which I'll come back to. Okay. So the center of gravity, this center that's just below our navel, this Dan Tien that the Chinese talked about. First of all, you want to feel your center of gravity. You want to feel the compression of your ribs and everything going down to this center, so that you're centered there in a very physical sense. But then once you do that, you get this sense that there's a connection to your mind through the fact, this is how it was taught to me. So very simply, thoughts, number one, emotions, number two, and will, or E, as the Chinese would call it, is the third element. Okay. And then the way it was taught to me from there was that the fourth element, which is a metaphysical element, our connection to the world, a fourth point is our dreaming point, which then sort of connects to the Aboriginal notion of dreaming, and then dreaming when we go to sleep, and consciousness in general being formed or connected from this bigger mind outside, but it's this metaphysical kind of umbilical cord, right, that's connected to your stomach. So then, so the center therefore comes from this physical. We use, it's like the body's been given to us to have an analogy to jump into to what is a center that has no center, what is a center that is no center. Because once you tap into that, there's this practice that we do in Tai Chi and in the other internal arts as well, called pushing hands, and it's about sensing somebody else's center. You touch with them, you make a connection with them, and then you can feel their center. And if they put their mind on any part of their center, you can push them over. You can get their center. But if they're really good, like my teacher, you can't get their center, because they've kind of transcended the physical center. And it's a bit like the now, right? The now, the mystery of the now is that if you try and grab it, it's already gone. And so there becomes this element of time, right? The mystery of time, of like, you think you've got this guy's center and you go for it, and then it's gone, and then you've lost your center. And so there's these analogous kind of practices with these deeper internal arts that then make you think about the philosophy of cosmology in the universe, right? And so when I see these circles with no center, I really think we're talking about, that deep mystery, this creative force that you just can't grab because it's gone. Does that help?
Beautiful, inspiring. Thank you. We're done, Karen.
Well, you're muted, Karen.
You're muted.
That's why. Sorry, I was muted. Melanie, please go ahead.
Gary, that was wonderful as always.
Thank you.
My son has autism, Asperger's, very high functioning, and he speaks Chinese, and he's very artistic. Chinese, for some reason, comes very easy to me because he can see what it means before he can even read it practically. Wow. And this is just an anecdote. I just wanted to let you know about this. I don't know why, but from the time that he was very young, when he was interested in Chinese, he was fascinated with the concept of qi. And he used to talk to his teachers at school about this, because school, of course, is very square. They want you to do a certain thing a certain way. And one time they wanted him to solve a Rubik's Cube. So he took it apart and he put it back together in the right way. And they said, no, you have to turn the things. And he said, why? So he was fascinated, and still is fascinated with this concept. And he studies it. He talks about it. He writes about it, because he said that kids with autism, which there's more and more and more nowadays, need to know about this. They need to know about, he's been in crop circles, and he says they need to know that they are the circle. They are not the square. And he wishes more people could be taught about this in school, especially if they're like him. So I really appreciate your insights. I have a huge page of notes written down on this to talk to him about it. So anyway, thank you for your talk very much.
You're welcome.
I'm muted again. Jonathan, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Thank you very
Welcome.
much. Yeah, no, it was really, I was sitting here and I was posing I was thinking to myself, how do we creatively practice crop circling? Especially if you can't get into the fields because you're over here. And I mean, and you answered it really wonderfully in the sense of the examples of the plant. In other words, we are embedded within the sacred geometry of the lighting of the planets. And what John Martineau has revealed, that I mean we're actually embedded within this. And so the practicing becomes this kind of this creative, chaotic, cosmic process that and I'm seeing now how to deal. Yesterday I showed a picture of all the data, in other words, that I've collected all the images. Now how to divine the data in terms of practicing, creatively practicing crop circling. And I'm thinking that's another question that was kind of running underneath all of this for me is, well, what is the significance, meaning, and purpose for this phenomena? If we step back to the 90s, the 80s, this, when this whole, why is this happening on planet Earth? What is is there a purpose to all of this? And so part of this blends in with how do we practice crop circling? So thank you very much. It was the way you're
welcome. Yeah. You made me think of in 2004, a guy I've been practicing martial arts with since '98, really dear brother of mine, Juggy, an Indian Sikh guy. We went to Africa together, and the music and the spirit and just there's you can call it voodoo if you like. It can possess you, okay? And
we call it woo-doo.
Voodoo.
Voodoo.
Exactly. You can whatever you like, okay? But the spirit can get you, right? Yeah. And it got him. We went round to this lady's place, and there was people playing music, and we were drinking attaya, this green tea with lots of sugar they put in it, but they drink this green tea, and we were playing music, and anyway, at one point we went out around the back to go to use the bathroom, and we were standing around the back using the bathroom, and my friend turned to me and said, and we were singing, and he said, I'm in heaven. This is heaven, okay? And I was like, really? Look around. And we stopped and looked around, and it was a rubbish dump. It was a trash. It was a horrible place. I said, if you took a photograph now and sent this back and said you're in heaven, what would people say? And his face, it was so, and it just goes to show you, doesn't it, that there's this place that we can go to inside when we're in the flow, when we're in this state of consciousness, when even the most ugliest of places around us can become beautiful. And so this play with the inside and the outside, you just reminded me of that one.
Yeah, thank you. No, this was very, very practical, but also very inspirational. So thank you much. Keep it up.
Thank
you.
Marianne, you are next.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi. Wow. Thank you. I love that we can go back to these basics, and it can be again, I can't hear it enough. Over and over. It's just wonderful. There were so many things that came to me. First of all, I don't want to, well, maybe I do want to toot my own horn, but the parallels between your talk and my talk were really strong.
I hope to catch yours.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, talking about this as a dojo, and there was a lot there. So thank you. And the thing about the landscape being both one for farming and one for warring, and I'd never really gotten that until you mentioned that today. And the beating the swords into plowshares, that analogy, it's strong, and that the crop circles, this communication, this desire for us to up level what it is, how we are relating to each other, is right there in that particular kind of landscape. That felt very, very profound. There were a lot of little details. The thing about boundaries and boundary crossing, which I feel like we're really being confronted with societally, and how do we have right relationship with everything that's happening, and like keep coming back, how do we find the beauty, like in the rubbish dump, like you're saying. So just, I guess I'm being a little repetitive, but
no, not at all.
Thank you. Just thank you.
You're welcome. Really, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you. Anybody else got any comments or questions? Kerry, hi. Oh, you're on mute, hi. Kerry. There you go.
Are we better
now? It's catching.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, Kerry.
Hi. Okay, so I pre-apologize if I'm saying things that have already been said in other places, because I'm very new to this. But I wanted to, there were so many things in your talk that just really, I was writing like crazy. But I wonder if one of the things that you said when you're talking about the British military being in Wiltshire and how the biggest bases are there, I was thinking about something that Jonathan said yesterday about the Michael Mary line, and I'm wondering if back in many years ago, when these bases were first coming, when it was more the military was based on religious wars and things like that, if they were placed in those locations because of the energy that would be provided to the military, although the military would never admit to something like that now, but I think that back in medieval times or prior to, I wonder if when there was more of a belief and they would put things that they believed it more, that they would have placed those bases in those locations because of that. Just that's just something to throw out to talk about. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, and you probably know this already too, but I'm going to throw it out anyway, is that there is a total solar eclipse happening in Ohio and along the Great Lakes next April. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also in Texas, it goes right across my house here in Texas.
It kind of goes like this. Yeah. Across the United States.
9th of April.
Yes, and it's going to be, I think that it's the last one for 300 years or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out. And then the last thing I wanted to throw out was that I'm a artist and children's children's book author, and I dream my stories. Everything I get, and I dream my drawings. So I just wanted to tell you that, another way an artist gets their stuff
Fantastic.
out.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's it, isn't it? That's the magic. That's wonderful.
It definitely is. I wake up and I remember one time my first thing was Mr. and Mrs. G are tired as tired could be, so I mean, it's just
fantastic.
But that's kind of the way it is with me. So yeah.
Excellent.
Anyway, but thank you. This has been a wonderful weekend. Although yesterday I sat with my mind going after Jonathan's talk. So it'll probably happen this afternoon again too.
I wanted to on the whether or not they knew about the military to place the bases there. I don't know that, but I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Onstott's work, Hidden in Plain Sight.
No.
Okay, so if you go on YouTube and you look at there's a series of videos. I think you can go onto the Sacred Geometry Academy as well. They're on there. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight. They were produced by Scott Onstott, who's a genius. And he shows the geometry of, you won't believe it, the geometry of the proportions and ratios of Washington and how it was all set up by the founding fathers, and using all of these proportions and ratios that we find in crop circles and so on. That will blow your mind. And so there has been a theme throughout history, which seems to go back through these secret societies of the Freemasons, the Priory de Sion, and so on, where they had this knowledge and they kept it amongst the elites. And you know, us lowly people weren't allowed to know this stuff. It was the priesthood that got to know all this sort of stuff. And again, my teacher, who I mentioned earlier, we went to a crop circle. I can't remember what year it was now. It was underneath. There's a Cleopatra's Needle, an obelisk. Okay, and they're very relevant to this Hidden in Plain Sight documentary that I just mentioned. There's an obelisk above a place called Cheryl. It's one of the white horses in Wiltshire. And there was a crop circle. It had these 9 crescents. I think it was 1999. Remember these 9 crescents, Karen? In the aha, Karen's wearing it. There we go. That one. And my teacher told me that when they put the obelisks up, the landowners, there's a whole story behind that obelisk and who it was dedicated to, one of the big landowners. And so he told me that these symbols were put up by all the Freemasons wearing their regalia. They all come and paraded around this landscape. So there's this big connection to these builders, you know, and they call God the great architect of the universe. I used to be a lawyer and I was a Freemason for 9 years. I went through the ranks of it. So I know a little bit about what goes on in the lodge and the square and the circle and all the allegory to all of this stuff. So basically my teacher said to me, the circle makers are saying to the elites, we know your symbols. We know your secrets. We've got all of them. I loved that.
It's wonderful.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thank
Colleen.
you.
Colleen.
Hi, Colleen.
Hi, thanks for the talk. That was great. I had a couple questions that were kind of related to the military and martial arts. I really like that you made the connection between the martial arts and how ancient that is, and that it also involves philosophy and war, and that it made me wonder about. I think I've heard there's been crop circles in China, but I'm wondering if you know that. And also, did your teacher ever make it into the Clay Hill Formation? Or you said he had family in town or something?
So I'll answer that one first. No, he didn't. He didn't make it down, so I still haven't managed to get into a crop circle. Next year, I'm definitely getting down there for sure. What was the other thing?
Is there crop circles in China?
Oh, do you know what? I think I heard a rumor about one, but I'm not absolutely sure about that. There was something else that you said that made me think, oh, we are war and all of that.
Philosophy, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of these sort of secret sects, these arts that I'm talking about, they were rebels. Another reason why I probably got attracted to it. So they didn't like the rulers, the Qing dynasty, and so they were rebels to overthrow the government. So they had all these secret hand signals and signs and so on, and to show themselves as members of particular sects. These were deadly, these arts. Life and death was there, you know, and they, you know, if they came across these soldiers that were part of the dynasty that they were opposing, it was death, you know. So a lot of it was weapons, a lot of these hand techniques these days come from what was originally weapons. It was you know, it was in your face and brutal and deadly. But the philosophy behind it was that if you understand your own nature, if you understand your own dark side, if you know yourself, then this notion of preparing, if you want peace in your life, then prepare for war. And so by censoring the anger, by censoring the dark side of your nature, by trying to put it in a box, you only make it bigger. You don't know it, you don't confront it, you don't know its signs. And so you know, like we're all bruised from trauma of our pasts in one way or another, and we all go through life where we've got this part of ourselves that, you know, we're working on, and that can be anger, that can be, you know, frustration and all those sorts of things, and the dark side of our nature, right, with regards to ourselves and a relationship to ourselves and a relationship to other people, our partners, our family, and so on. And so that's really what we're talking about with the internal war. And the external war is this mirror, this philosophy of like, if we all practice this warrior-like kind of practice, then knowing the horrors of war, and that there's, you know, it's not where you want to go. But by becoming great warriors, we never fight. That's kind of the paradox of it. So that's this thing which I find quite interesting with Wiltshire, having this military, and, you know, and the British, you know, we've been the biggest warmongers around the world with our colonization over the last, you know, so many years. So you know, and that's all come about through brutality and violence and the dark side, I would suggest, of humanity, where there could be a flip side. So that's why I bring that sort of darkness and light up.
Thanks, Colleen. Was it Michael that used to say, is it the brighter the light, the darker the shadow?
Isn't it?
Yeah. Anybody else got any questions or comments that they'd like to make? Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Gary. This is a simple question. What is your perspective on the newly crowned King Charles? I asked that question because I've read this book of his.
Oh, wow.
Harmony, a new way of looking at our world. And he's got all kinds of material in here about geometry and sacred geometry, and making the case for radical change to save ourselves. And he seems like a real somebody we want to get on side here. And I was wondering how realistic it would be to try and, you know, contact the man and get a discussion going, because he knows what's been happening in his realm. From what I hear, he gets his copy of the Temporary Temples yearbook every year, and he's paying attention. And I just wonder what a man on the ground there of English subject might think of.
Wow.
The potential for King Charles.
Oh, wow. I mean, we haven't really noticed much difference in our lives since he's been crowned. The only thing I noticed the other day when I saw a news article and they said KC after a barrister instead of QC, I went, oh yeah, it's King's Counsel now, isn't it? Not Queen's Counsel. See, on the one hand, Prince Captain Mark Phillips, who was the Queen's husband, Queen Elizabeth's husband, had a big fascination with UFOs, and so he liked to keep informed. And it's been my understanding that Prince Charles, or now King Charles, has been the same with crop circles and geometry and stuff. I mean, he's the founder or the patron of the Islamic college that John Martineau did his master's thesis at under the mentorship of Keith Critchlow. And so the fact that he knows and is well tuned into all this stuff is well known amongst those of us that have taken an interest in these subjects. However, there is this dark side of things that are going on at the moment in the world, and some of that's to do with, for example, the World Health Organization's sort of takeover of everybody's sovereignty in 192 countries that's being proposed. Well, it's not even being proposed as a debate. It's sort of on the statute books. One of our brave MPs has stood up in Parliament to oppose it. But if we don't do anything to stop it, then next May, we will be part of a treaty which puts an unelected body in Switzerland in power of making decisions whether or not we get locked down, whether or not there's a pandemic, whether or not we have to take any kind of experimental medication for whatever it is, without recourse for debate in our House of Parliament, without recourse to what we've been given to know as our democracy. And so that's very worrying. And Prince Charles is all for it. So for a sovereign to be keen on giving up our sovereignty, I'm confused about his kingship. And here's the thing. So if you watch the Netflix show The Crown, when the Duke of Edinburgh came over from Greece, smuggled out in a tea chest and married our Queen, it was because the commoners had had enough, and they were at their door, as has happened many times in history before, as we know, with the Russian Tsars and the French Revolution and so on. When these people, their power and their dominion over the commoners gets too much, and we say enough's enough, we chop their heads off. And so they've learned these empires, these colonialists, they've learned over the years that they've got to be careful and keep a balance with us commoners, because every now and again we say that's enough of that, and we break all the rules. And so they've been very mindful of that. And this prison that it seems that we're about to be locked into, in many ways there's plenty of evidence for it, the censorship, the increased censorship that's happening, the refusal to debate these issues in our parliament shows that our democracy is a sham, because it's been proposed in a proper way for a debate to say, look, we argued about giving up our sovereignty to the European Union and fought to take back control, which turned this country into complete turmoil and divided people. And now we're going to give it up to an unelected body, and it's supported by the sovereign who's supposed to stand for this country. I could go on and on and on, Mark, but I think you get the point.
I asked for a perspective, and boy, I'm getting it.
You're getting it. I'm not too keen on the guy, really, from that perspective. I'd be more keen if he was really promoting that harmony stuff and really saying, well, no, we're not having any of this with this WHO and this World Economic Forum's ideas to turn us all into kind of useless class. That's what Yuval Noah Harari's said we're all going to become when AI takes over. And I think that they're kind of gearing up as if they're getting ready for that to protect themselves. So I'm a bit worried about all that.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a really tricky one. I mean, I don't know about particularly much about his attitude towards the WHO or anything like that, but he founded in the UK the Prince's School of Traditional Arts, which was what Gary was talking about, and he has done a lot to promote, the keeping in practice many traditional arts, not just the Islamic ones, but lots and lots of the traditional arts from all over the world, because many of those arts are dying. They're not being practiced anymore, and so they've ceased to be living traditions. So I think part of his setup of the Prince's School was to do something about that. And he does have an interest in geometry, particularly. He's also got a very big interest in environmentalism, in also in architecture as well. He's pretty big on that as well. He wrote a foreword, I think, for Keith Critchlow's book on the geometry of flowers, which was really good. Brilliant. So yeah, it's kind of difficult, and I'm kind of never really sure these days how much power the monarchy has in political spheres. I don't know. I mean, essentially, if Parliament say something is so, then he has to sign it into assent, and that's it. That's his constitutional job. Although I do, I mean, he has never been one to shy away from giving his opinion on things, but I think he does it less so these days now that he is king. So I don't know. It's kind of, on the one hand, he's very supportive of the traditional arts, and through that, things like the crop circles. But on the other hand, he does represent an unelected elite, so he's kind of a real paradox, really, I think. Yeah.
Well, the English monarchy from 10. I mean, when I found out that the City of London is a private corporation, the Queen and the King the King has to ask permission to enter the City of London. They're not allowed to go there. This has been the way since 1067. William the Conqueror came over in 1066, sacked England, but didn't take the city. And then in 1067 got invested as the royal family with all the pomp and splendor. But the City of London has its own police force, just like Rome, just like the Vatican. It has its own. Is a man called a remembrancer, and he sits on Parliament as an unelected person who can veto any law. He's the final sayer. He's the person that has the final say on any legislation, not the king. So as Karen said, the king's there for royal assent once the process of bringing and enacting a law into through Parliament has gone in up to for the final stage royal assent. It's a rubber stamp exercise. This remembrance of the guy who runs the city, which is the real power behind the Empire of England, he can say no, that's not happening.
Who is that?
He's called a remembrancer.
Who does he have a name?
I don't know who the remembrancer is right now. I'm not even sure if you could Google it and find out. But the city, if you look at it, there's a wonderful documentary on YouTube called The Spider's Web. It was made with £4,000 budget, and it will give you all the history. It will blow your mind as to what the City of London really is, and it shows and demonstrates that the royal family is nothing more than people wearing fancy costumes, really, and gives us the illusion that they're in charge, but they're not really. The corporations are in charge, and the corporations run through the city where all the money is. I mean, the British Empire could go on. The British Empire was outsourced from the beginning. We did all our colonial exploits through the East India Company. It was a private company from the beginning. It wasn't done by Queen and Country. So it's always been this private public partnership, let's say. It's interesting.
Sounds like a land that can use crop circles.
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
That's
Absolutely.
why my teacher was American, Mark. Okay, and he came across from America for 10 years every year to go in the crop circles with me, and he used to laugh and joke and say, "I begged the creative force to come to have the crop circles in America, so I don't have to come to your godforsaken country because it's the heart of darkness." He said he called the city of London the heart of darkness.
Kathleen,
all right,
hi.
so thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I appreciated Mark's suggestion, and I think I heard Mark say, did I hear this correctly, that King Charles gets a copy of the temporary temple's yearbook? And I also appreciate your intensity and your opinions, Gary. You live in England, and you have a political opinion about a lot of things that directly impact you regarding the king's power in England. But really, aren't we just talking about having more open and safe dialogue about an important topic? Wouldn't it be nice to have twice as many people here at the Crop Circle conference, or maybe 10 times as many, if the king at least were able to say, oh, I get this yearbook because this phenomena really interests me. There's no need to be thinking about political decisions regarding opening up the dialogue and just normalizing awareness that this is happening, and it means different things to different people. The king doesn't want to besmirch his reputation by saying anything like little gray people are making these, but I think that's great that that he's getting the circles. And certainly your presentation, Gary, just really points to the fact that the circles invite an expansion of awareness and consciousness around who we are as individuals. And it's really about the dialogue and what it means to consider these things, to consider our life force, our relationship to our own awareness in understanding these circles and this very long history that you're talking about that brings together so many multidisciplinary threads of endeavor and creativity. Mm-hmm. Would just be really nice to have the circles and the work of people like Karen and Steve move out of the darkness of marginalized corners of creativity. So I think it'd be nice if King Charles actually put his stamp of approval on the yearbook.
I think
it would be lovely. A nice coffee table book.
Yeah, I think that would be lovely, but it will never happen. I just, I mean, it would be a very private interest, like so many other interests of the royal family, that they're kept really under the rug and certainly out of the way of the press.
Doesn't that answer the question of what Mark, the king of this country, the man who's in charge, he mustn't say he likes crop circles for fear of ridicule and condemnation.
Yep. I mean, he's kind of used to ridicule on one level. I mean, his environmentalism has gone on for years, and he really did take some stick in the press for that over years. It's the same with his attitude to architecture, modern architecture in this country as well. Perhaps he thinks he's taken all the stick he can. I don't know, but I think it's even less likely now that he's monarch that he would ever say anything. He's not supposed to say anything like that. That his role now is just he's a figurehead essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so it is that time to say goodbye. And I know it's so sad, isn't it, when you get to the end of the month and next week we won't be meeting. It's awful, isn't it? But we will be having some other online sessions some point very, very soon. So if you're not, please subscribe to the newsletter, and that will let you know what we're going to be doing. Jonathan?
Yeah, for those who were participating in the consciousness where we began a month ago, the 1st of October, again, continue your portfolios. And I think it would be interesting to try to bookend or go back and look at the recordings of these and practice crop circling. I mean, we really need to be practicing this, and it's striking. That's a real major, for me, it's a real major takeaway, because I always, it was always so important to get it to do the field work, but I think one can do the field work as Gary's laid out here as a spiritual practice. Do Tai Chi and crop circles at the same time somehow, and play with the imagery. Allow them and put these and like what Michael said, put the images on the wall and let them speak to you, because there is a message coming from this non-human intelligence, or this other than human existential real species. I mean, they're folks, we are being visited, and you have all of this stuff on tape now, and look at Karen. I mean, there's so much information here, and just it will emerge to you. Put some of them under your pillow at night, or however you want to, put them in the bathroom, put them in front of the toilet when you're sitting there on your throne. I think you see what I'm trying to say. There's something very alive here that thank goodness for Zoom, but I think there's something that we're being called, like Karen's, we've been called to deal with this phenomena, to work with this phenomena, which is beyond royalty. I totally, this is a divine manifestation in many ways. So how do we divine the data that is being given to us? We know it's not of human origin. there's something going on here that is cosmologically creative.
Yep. I mean, it's, harking back to the consciousness workshop, which was the first session of the conference right back at the beginning. We talked about the idea of a portfolio of participation, which is kind of where you basically write your story with the phenomenon. How did you first come into contact with it? What were your feelings about it then? What have been your key experiences as your participation has gone on? And it's a really, really good way of sort of looking at, how you've changed, how it's changed you, how you've changed your mind about it, and so on. It's a really interesting exercise. And then the other one we talked briefly about was a portfolio of participation, where you look at the ways in which you could engage more with the phenomenon. What are your particular interests, with the circles? What is it that really speaks to you? How might you be able to engage with that more, or find out about that more, or network with people who know about that a little bit more? So these were kinds of some of the things that we talked about during the consciousness workshop, but we will probably come back and maybe do an on workshop about that at some point, because I think it's, people are always looking for, how can I get involved a bit more, and so how can I track what's going on? So maybe at some point, Jonathan, we'll get our heads together and sort something out.
Practice, participate, and practice. And again, look at this not at the end. This is actually really a beginning on a new level. Gary, thank you very, very much. You really.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, another round of applause for Gary, everybody, please.
Thank you.
And check out his web page or his Facebook page. Yes, Against the Grain.
Against the Grain.
Against the Grain, Peter, on Facebook.
Peter contributes to that too. That's wonderful.
Yeah, Peter's done some great articles. Yeah. And Karen's got one coming up soon.
It's a website now, isn't it?
It's a website now as well, yes. Some articles. It's a web page, so I'm posting articles that are sort of a wider sphere than crop circles as well. So we've got there's a journalist, Caitlin Johnson, who writes some great articles. Nick Collerstrom, Dr. Nick Collerstrom, used to be a crop researcher back in the days, written a couple. Peter's written some. Karen's got one coming, brilliant article coming from Karen soon. Look out for that one.
Good.
And Karen, I just want to give Karen a huge round of applause.
Oh, well, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Karen.
This whole conference and the way that it has coherently built this body of investigation and inroads into this subject matter. Bless you. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. Bless you too, Marianne. Thank you.
Prolific participation.
Yep, I'm all for that. Yep. Okay, guys. Well, look, lovely to see you all, and I hope to see you again very soon at some event that we'll be putting up at some point. Please stay in touch, and you'll get the emails this week with links to Jonathan and Gary's presentation. And for those of you that book for the entire conference, I will actually send another email out to you with all the links, so that you've got them all in one place, to keep them all together, because otherwise it gets very convoluted and you lose emails and everything. But if you do lose anything or you run into any problems, then I'm always available on email if you need me. Okay, well, good night, everybody from the UK, and
thank you.
See you very soon. And thank you very much for your company over the last month. Okay, bye-bye now.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye.
Bye.
Hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista.
Travel safe. Thank you, Gary. That was wonderful. Very good.
Thank you. Thanks very much.